Hey everybody, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Solving the Deployment Crisis with GNU GUIX. It's not pronounced GUIX at all.
No.
You probably thought it was, but it's GUIX.
Or GUIX.
Yeah, it's not GUIX either. You probably were like, oh yeah, that looks like GUIX or GUIX, but it's not. It's GUIX because the main author is French, except that excuse no longer works now that I know French people who don't think it sounds like that. Yeah, welcome. So we're going to solve it today. By the time this talk is done, it's solved. Yeah,
solved.
Don't worry. It'll be great.
Done.
Okay, so all right, let's setting the stage. Let's get into this talk.
Yes.
Yes, all right. Okay, wait, who is David Thompson? David Thompson, this guy right here. David Thompson is my friend. He's a contributor to GNU GUIL and many other GNU GUIL related projects. I don't know if I should hold this thing. No, it doesn't go very far. He works on a number of cool GUIL and scheme-related things. He has a game engine called Fly, which is functional reactive programming. He also is one of the people who got me into GUIX, convinced me when I was like, oh, we got to solve this problem. I'm going to go this direction or this direction or this direction. He's like, look at GUIX, look at GUIX. And then it ended up being worth it. Yeah. And eventually I've become convinced. And so, yeah.
Right. And,
you should speak into the microphone.
Okay, yes. But
Yeah.
who's Chris Webber? How many people know Chris Webber? Chris Webber's pretty famous around here, right? Yeah, pretty much
Yeah,
everyone.
some
But
people
actually,
know.
a lot of people don't. So Chris Webber is the lead maintainer of GNU Media Goblin.
Yeah.
Of the shirt.
Speak in the
A
mic.
very important project, if you don't know about it, for will soon be federated media sharing. He's currently working on a W3C working group for a federation standard. He's also become a bit of a GUIL programmer lately.
Yeah.
He's working on an asynchronous programming library for GUIL, kind of a la Python's async await.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
that's
All right.
Chris.
Yeah. So let's
Take it away.
let's jump into the talk. So this is the web we want, right? This is like the picture of the internet that they show you in class textbooks, right? It's this decentralized thing, you know. One of these nodes go down, it's okay. You can just route around it. Super great, right? Like this is like the vision of the internet that we think about and would like to have. But this is the actual like direction that the internet's heading, right? You've got this large centralized silo in the middle, and we're kind of like sucking on the edges of it. Like, you know, please accept my video to YouTube. If it goes down, that'll be so sad, you know. And you've got this big centralized provider, right? So, and unfortunately, this is subject to censorship, right? You know, somebody can come in and they're like, you know, copyright violation, or I don't like you, or I'm going to be something or other, or I'm some sort of state agency that says you have to take this down or something like that. And what's a big centralized provider going to do? They'll probably just take it down, right? So we're also, you know, hey, Snowden keynote, right? We're very aware of the state of surveillance, and in a large system, it's very easy to have something that can actually just look from the inside at everybody, right? So this isn't the version of things we want, right? So, and this is also kind of a problem because, you know, you might have this big central thing, and, you know, you're like, oh, well, it looks pretty robust. It's pretty big, right? Of course, big things can pop. And when they pop, everything around them pops, you know? So it's not what we want, right? So that's a sad internet. So like, I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to work on this project called Media Goblin. We're going to bring it to the people. We're going to have decentralized video, image, and blah, blah, blah sharing. This will be great. And I've been doing this for the last few years. And it's like, yeah, you know, yeah, we're going to make this happen. Except, oh, no. I'm afraid to deploy my own software and upgrade it, and I get people who deploy it, and they're like, this is great, and then they're like, oh no, I did an apt-get upgrade, and then my virtual env's broke, and everything's terrible, and I'm so sad, you know, and like, so this is like, to the point where I took a sabbatical this year to look into what we can do, because it's such a problem. So what can we do in the age where, you know, almost nobody, including the people who write the stuff, can really keep on top of deploying and keeping, you know, web services like this stuff running, right?
I do DevOps for a living, and I have a hard time
Right.
self-hosting my own things and finding the time to maintain them.
Yeah, we want to go beyond DevOps to user ops, right? User-facing deployment stuff. Unfortunately, these systems, one of the reasons why we end up in this phase is that these deployment systems that we have are dependent on the phase of the moon of some sort of packaging system, right? You know, I once had a hackathon where I spent the whole prior day making sure, in fact, it's just happened yesterday again, I spent the prior day making sure that, okay, everything's installing right, great, this package system and this package system align, everything's going to be fine. And then I show up the next day, oh, somebody updated something in the package index, and on the Python package index, people's installs aren't working. Oh no, and I spent 3 hours trying to fix it, and then people who showed up and they're like, I can't wait to become a contributor, are like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to be a contributor now, and they walk away, right? What a crappy situation. I never want to be in that situation again, right? So you're dependent on the phase of the moon of this distribution. whether or not it's your GNU Linux distribution or your language distribution, and it's not great, right? This kind of time-based fixing is kind of sad, right? So, and we're now in the world of one language packager per child, right? And it's every language wants to be cool now. You're like, I'm a cool language, I'm Go, I'm Rust, or whatever, right? All those other languages, they have cool package managers. Let me have one too, right? Now people will take me seriously. Yeah, you know what it's like to run a modern project where you have Python packages working with core Debian or Fedora's packages, and then you've got eventually you have JavaScript things, and it's like, wait, you shouldn't check those into Git maybe for some reason, so oh, okay, well, we'll use npm, and now we've got Bower, and now you have to become an expert in every single one of these systems, right? It's terrible. It's terrible. This is not a great state of the world, even though everybody's like, yeah, let's have this. And this is one of the reasons why we're in this state of giving up deployment, right? It's it's too hard to keep track of all these things. So, And let's not forget about configuration management, right? Yeah, this is a tar pit, right? Who here is familiar with the term Turing tar pit, right? You might not be familiar with it. It basically means a language in which everything is possible, but everything is difficult at the same time, right? Not everything is possible, but terrible to do, right? And many configuration management systems, I was very interested when I started my sabbatical, well, you might be deploying Media Goblin, and you might be deploying Media Goblin. Surely these configuration steps are pretty similar, right? So we should have recipes and stuff like this. Where's Ansible and Salt's recipes things? Most of them are oh yeah, we have them. Just download it from my GitHub and your GitHub, and then change them so that you'll never be able to synchronize them together, right? And then they're oh yeah, well don't worry, we're using YAML or some other terrible language like this, and don't worry because it's not Turing complete. Except, oh wait, we really need for loops. We need conditionals. We need some way to substitute variables. So Salt and Ansible use YAML files, and you use a web templating language to be able to generate the YAML. So now you have the worst combination of everything, because you're no Turing completeness. Oh wait, we need it. And yeah, now you're in tar pit zone. So sad things. So people are Docker. This is the answer, right? Docker or something like it, right?
Docker's the answer.
It's done. Docker's the answer and a talk, right? So I built it for you, no problem. You can just run it on your machine, and I already solved all the hard parts because you don't have to worry about it. Well, this sounds pretty good, right? What a great logo. You've got a whale with these containers on its back. It's very reassuring. Millions of dollars behind this company. I'm feeling confident. But this might not be the best situation, it turns out. These containers might not be as stable of a situation as we thought they were. There's some problems with these, right? So each one of these containers is effectively a statically compiled distribution as a binary, which might have some of its own problems. You're oh yeah, well don't worry. They can diff between the versions. So, I've done merges in Git with text files, so I don't really want to do merges as things change between giant binary distributions. So I'm not sure that really works. So you end up having very heavy things where we throw out the great ideas of dynamic linking for basically distribution-sized static compilation. These are really hard to introspect, right? When you're oh, don't worry, I figured it out for you. Yeah, but what happens when you need to look inside of this, right? So there's an analysis of Docker Hub. I don't know if all of you have seen this. So over 70% of the top 100 images on Docker Hub have medium to high level vulnerabilities. And 30 to 40% have shell shock and heartbleed level vulnerabilities when this blog post went out. Wow, that is not really awesome. I would say pretty not awesome, especially not as these things come out every day. New vulnerabilities all the time. And is it reproducible? It's not reproducible as in the sense of reproducible builds. There'll be more talk on this here. And Docker's DSL is really not expressive, right? You can't really do everything that you might want to be able to do. And you're still dependent on this guy, right? Somebody who built this thing was still dependent on this. And if shell shock or whatever ends up happening, this whole situation, you might not be able to actually reproduce this thing at all because the phase of the moon might have changed.
How many people use Docker currently?
Yeah, a number of hands.
Yeah.
I empathize with why Docker has become so big, and it's not just Docker, right? I think that. Sorry.
No, I was wondering, have people been told not to run apt-get upgrade in their Docker containers in their Docker
It's
files?
in the official FAQ. Don't run apt-get upgrade, right?
So
unfortunately, this is not just Docker, right? We're seeing a lot more of this encouragement, oh yeah, the giving up, the F it, I'm out version of deployment, right? This is too hard to figure out, so we'll just put it in this thing for you.
Frozen pizza-driven development.
Yeah, that's right.
Put the pizza together once, freeze it, and just deliver it to people.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got CoreOS. Even unfortunately, GNOME, I think, is heading in this direction with XDG app. I mean, the sandboxing is great, but everything else I'm not sure about. Cubes is going, snappy, and I actually think that we're losing the ability to reason about free software. This is a really dangerous direction. I think that this is a policy issue disguised as a technical issue. And we are getting to the point where we no longer often know how to build and no longer get to the point where we no longer how to safely modify our applications. That is a really bad direction for software freedom. Really bad. If it's hard to build, run, and modify software, what does that mean for software freedom? That's those are our core principles. So here we are. We have large centralized applications. We have containers falling off of them. This is the state of the world that we live in. And this is not the direction that I want things to be in.
I like this picture because the whale thinks everything is fine.
Yeah, that's right. So enter Geeks and Geeks SD. I'm going to let my friend David take over from this point.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris is a much better speaker than I am, so I'm going to fumble through this. So here's our nice logo. Chris has it on a T-shirt. I have it on a T-shirt. We don't have T-shirts yet, but
we're going to
sometime.
switch T-shirts tomorrow.
So we're going to introduce a concept called functional package management. And when most people think about functional, they think, well, apt-get works, right? RPM works. Well, I don't mean that it works. We mean mathematics, that given the same inputs to something, you get the same output. And in the functional package management world, dependencies are precisely specified. And I don't mean saying that Media Goblin depends on version Python between 2.7 and greater. I meant, well, this package depends on Python compiled with these particular flags, with these particular dependencies, all the way down to what we call the bootstrap binaries, the compiler's compiler. So we actually have things very explicit. So this is not your average kind of packaging paradigm. So as in the Snowden conversation, DKG mentioned reproducible builds. I don't know if anyone caught that. And there's a talk tomorrow by the Debian people about this. But Geeks does it too. We're working on it. There's a reproduciblebuilds.org site that has a lot of projects that are involved here.
Thanks, Debian, for doing a lot of the hard work for us.
Yes, yeah, big thanks to Debian on this one. We pull a lot of their fixes. So the other important thing is that built packages are immutable. So we know with the traditional distribution, we're familiar with the /usr directory, right? And then when we install a package, we just shove stuff in there and modify it. And sometimes something's broken in there, and we go in there and we tweak it and make it work for us. You don't do that in Geeks. So the result of a package is immutable, and for that we get consistency and we get reliability from it. You can also manage packages without being the root user, unprivileged. That's very important. It means you're not under the power of the sysadmin, or different users can use different things. And we also get atomic upgrades and rollbacks, which means that either a package installation or actually a reversal of a package installation will either work or nothing happens. You could unplug the power cord, something bad could happen in the build process, and you'd never be left in an inconsistent state. And that's very important. I don't know. I don't want to pick on Debian. There's so many Debian people here, and I love Debian. But have you had an apt-get upgrade or an apt-get dist upgrade go wrong? I have. I don't want to. I love Debian. I've got to repeat that all the time. Great. So we captured the full dependency graph. So this is actually a graph produced by Geeks about core utils, and it's kind of simplified. It doesn't include the compiler toolchain. We can see a simple tool can actually generate this whole thing. There's a data structure in Geeks that represents this, and so we can really introspect the system. You can't do this with Docker, right? You're not going to have it. So your profile, my profile, we have these things called profiles, which are a set of packages that each user can have. Each user could have many of them, depends on the task you want. So Chris and I can be on the same machine and using different versions of Emacs without issues, or different versions of anything, really. And we can actually have different versions of different applications linking against different versions of C-share libraries. So we're able to, we don't have this global state of /user. We don't have it. So we think this gives users the practical freedom to have control over their software, right? I mean, how many people have had an issue where they want to do development on a piece of software, but the package they have, a version of a library they have is too old, and if they were to change it, they would break the rest of their distribution, right? They'd break applications that really need it. So do something.
A lot of hands, actually.
Right. Okay. So transactional upgrades and rollbacks. So if you have a bad upgrade, which sometimes happens, you go update a package and it didn't work, and a lot of times, unless you took a disk image beforehand, you're not going to get back to that state. You'll have to figure out how to kind of like undo that. Sometimes like an app get removed and then like kind of rolling back, that'll sort of help, but it's still an imperative change to like modify some things and then put other stuff back. But in GUIX, you could just say GUIX package -- rollback, and it'll actually revert to the previous generation. It'll just basically change a pointer, a symlink to like where, this profile was here. Oh, actually, I want to use this one. I'm just going to switch. And so with that, you're a time wizard. Woo! And that's Gerald Sussman right there in the Doctor Who.
Yeah, Matt Smith, Gerald Sussman. So Matt Smith totally took his ideas from SICP, I think.
Yes.
So.
It's a bit of an in-joke, so yeah, moving on. So yeah, so in a lot of ways, this is like Git for your operating system. This is an Emacs view of this, and you can see all these little crazy things on the right here. They're different like hashes. So each package build has like a unique hash code associated with it. So like Emacs built with with or without like X11 support is going to be a different hash code here, and every build gets it's like its own little file system tree, its own little root directory. You can keep history until you don't need it. On the top here, there's like a whole list of generations of Chris's Quebber's profile here. And when you're done with them, you can have as many as you want. And then when you want to reclaim the disk space, you can just say, I don't need these generations anymore. And the system will be free to garbage collect it. And so how many people here are developers? Develop, maybe web applications in particular? So a lot of people, right? So how many people do Python? Okay, right? Are you familiar with virtual env? Where it make like a Python environment specific to a particular project. GUIX has something called GUIX environment, and it's like virtual env, but for everything. So any kind of software. So a really quick example: I want to do some XML parsing with Ruby. Which IRB? That's the Ruby Interactive shell. I don't have Ruby. Well, I can tell GUIX environment to give me Ruby and an XML parser called Nokogiri, makes a subshell. I'm like, oh, look, I have IRB now. I jump in, I require the Nokogiri library, and there I have it, and I'm off to the races, right? I can exit that and be done. I haven't polluted my package installation at all. That's been an isolated environment.
And one cool thing is you can check in a little like geeks.scm or whatever with your repository, and anybody who comes to hack on it, they can just do geeks environment -l geeks.scm and get everything you need. All the C libraries, everything for that project, and be up and hacking in minutes.
So, yes, like a universal virtual env. So now this is where we get a little more technical, right? GUIX is written in Scheme. Is anyone familiar with Scheme or Lisp in general?
Lots of parentheses.
Yeah, so lots of the parentheses, right? So this is the package definition for grep. This is the real package definition for grep. It's very small. It's mostly metadata. But you see, we have a build system, the GNU build system. That's like the abstract thing that says, you want to do a configure, make, install. So we have a pretty expressive and pretty terse language for representing these packages. And these aren't binaries, right? These are the recipes for how to build them from source yourself, automatically. So as an addition to that, GUIX is a library. All the data structures, all the procedures are exposed to you as Guile APIs. So through this like low-level API of package management, on top of it, we've been able to build declarative configuration management for your whole system, universal language packaging for a variety of programming languages, local dev environments, as I mentioned, local VM creation, and recently Linux containers. We have a slowly evolving implementation of. And so, add your own stuff on top of this. I have a work in progress like web interface that's built on top of this. So.
And I want to toss in one more thing. If you're familiar with Nix, this is the key difference between GUIX and Nix, is that we have a real programming language we can do all these things in, and you have the data structures. And this means, like, normally between all these tools, it's like scar tissue to transform between them. And that's not true in GUIX. It's very easy to just import and work with those data structures, and you can build things that move between the layers very easily in GUIX in a way that's extremely painful otherwise.
Yeah. For those familiar with Nix, a lot of tools, they'll take the Nix language and they'll produce an XML syntax tree from it, and they have to process that and work with it. In GUIX, you just have the objects. They're pure scheme objects. You just map over them, map, filter, fold, all your friends there. So this is we do full system configuration management. This is the real configuration for my laptop. It's this page of code. So we have a number of packages. The users are on there. The file systems I use, my grub configuration, all that. And that's really it. Like the page of code, I run my laptop on that. I use it every day. It's great and it's reliable. And if something goes wrong, just like with the package things, I can roll back to the previous working system from the grub boot menu.
Not just the like your previous like select the kernel from that thing, all the packages, all the config files and everything. You upgrade Media Goblin and Apache at the same time, you can move all of that back at the same time, one operation.
Yeah, so like real quick example, recently we've started to get GNOME support, but it's been like kind of shaky, so I upgraded to it, and I realized that when I closed my laptop and it suspended and I opened it back up, it would suspend again infinitely. And that was really terrible. So what I did is I just rebooted the machine, and I just picked the version that the previous instance of the system that had XFCE, and I went back to being happy until that problem was resolved. GUIX is really cool and all, but we know that there's a plethora of language-specific package managers, and they all have their own repositories. One of which is the Python package index. So in order to really benefit from GUIX, you need to import all sorts of things into GUIX. They need to be GUIX packages in order to have these rollbacks and atomic upgrades and all that stuff. So in order to make people's lives easier, we're trying to make tools that allow you to semi-automatically import code for packages. So you can see, I can say GUIX import PyPy Piglet. Piglet's a graphics programming library for Python. It spits out some scheme code. It might not be the exact thing, but pretty much all the boilerplate, some of the dependencies, the hash of the source code tarball, all that's taken care of for you. And we have a number of these for a variety of languages, and we're improving them. So we're trying to make people's lives easy here. So that's what we have. And now what's in store? This is my kind of personal thing. I'm working on a tool called GUIX Deploy. And what that is a remote cluster management tool for people that know Ansible or Chef or Salt, right? You manage a whole set of remote machines. We don't have that yet. We have local configuration management, but we don't have some for some arbitrary number of remote machines. We really need that, and that's like kind of why I want to make my big focus. And not only it'll work for anything. I want it to work on bare metal, VMs, containers, whatever you want. And I'll hand it over to Chris.
So this one is a particular important thing for me. I described this a bit previously. I would really like to have it be easy for people to be able to select and do installations of things very simply, right? I want you to be able to say, I want Media Goblin, I want WordPress, I want blah, 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 and just select those from a web interface or something like that, and not have to repeat yourself, right? You shouldn't have to drop your domain name repeatedly and all these things. And GUIX has some tooling where there's a directed acyclic graph that, to get technical, that can actually infer variables from other things. So you can simplify the amount of steps. And if we just expose that in a web interface, you could just fill in some variable once, and the rest of the system can be smart about how it fills everything else in. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, okay, so is anyone familiar with XDG app and their app sandboxing? All right, not really. Okay, so yeah, that's a project by GNOME. And basically, the idea there is to make applications that can't, that only have certain privileges and have as few privileges as they need to work. So like silly example, but why should the solitaire in GNOME have access to your GPG keys if it wanted to, right? I mean, your home directory is there; it has permission to read it because it's running as your user. And the same thing, like what about your web browser? We find there's vulnerabilities in WebKit and Gecko all the time. So we want to do things like wrap, in our case, IceCat. Firefox in a container so that it only has access to, say, your downloads directory in the Mozilla configuration. It couldn't touch your keys even if it was exploited. Yeah.
So how do we make this really easy for users otherwise, right? It would be great if we have a graphical user interface to be able to install things. Right now, my friend Ava made a joke that GUIX is a little bit like Gentoo for adults. You boot up a USB key and you manually, partition your disk and stuff like that. And there's no reason that things have to be this way. We can build easy tools, and in fact, the tools, probably it's even easier for us to build it because we have access to the data structures and everything. But it needs to be done. Yeah. So, maybe if you're interested in this, yeah.
Please help.
Yeah, please help. So, and we would love to have a graphical interface for where you can do system configuration, your usual packaging type stuff. But, why not? Why should you have to do GUIX package -- rollback if you're not somebody who's familiar with the command line? It would be great to just have something in the same GUI where you can just click on that and get back if things go badly.
Right. So I mentioned, we're trying to make it using a variety of different programming languages that have their own package managers easy. Some languages are nice, Python in particular, but there are others that are really difficult, and Node.js is a big one. The things available on npmjs.org, most of the time, don't have the corresponding source code with them and other things. And not only that, the dependency graphs are usually, even for simple things like, oh, I want Grunt, the build system. It's like, hundreds of dependencies in that graph. There's a footnote here that Chris wrote about, he tried to package jQuery for GUIX, and I forget the dependency tree there was like 200 something nodes.
It's not just bad for GUIX either. Like, I think JavaScript is really what's kept us out of Debian and like Fedora and stuff for years. And we're a Python application.
Yep. So Java's also really bad. I won't get into that, but Java has a lot of like pre-built jars that are in everything, and I'm convinced that no one actually knows how to build anything from source anymore in Java land. So send help if you know these languages at all. You like really know the ins and outs of them. Like we could really use your help.
So let's wrap up. So the state of GUIX. What is the state of GUIX? Well, it's still beta. We switched the phrase alpha to beta very recently, but you know, so like, what does that mean? But I mean, I actually run it on my laptop. I dual boot between Debian and GUIX-SD, and most of the time I'm in GUIX-SD these days, though I do sometimes move back to Debian. And I would say that you're like, oh, well, I'm a little bit nervous. This seems like like it's beta, but in a certain sense, people deploy all sorts of ridiculous crap on their servers right now. I've explained some of the problems with all of them. So I think that investing in GUIX
every day.
Yeah, if you're interested in investing in GUIX, in a certain sense, I think it has a good foundation in which to be able to build upon, and we just need more tooling on top of it. It's a delight to run. I do it. It's very easy to develop and get involved in. Our friend Ludovic, the maintainer, often confusingly says GUIX is the Emacs of distros, and I think most people don't know what that means. But what he really means is that it's something that encourages users to become contributors over time because it's so easy to encourage that. And I think that that's one of the really key features of GUIX is that it's very easy to become involved in the project, and it's a very good, friendly community.
Yeah, if you remember that package expression for grep earlier, a lot of simple tools are not more code than that, so people can actually really get involved and package something that they want that's missing without too much difficulty, and often they do that, so a lot of new contributors come in. And
it's fearless to add a new package and test it because you're not going to break your system. And we have about 3,350 packages now, but obviously we'd love more. We have about 20 to 30 contributors per month, which is pretty good, but things are increasing pretty fast, and we would love you to become one of those ones on that number.
Right, so yeah, and so here's how you can help. A really easy one is to just, test drive GUIX. GUIX will run not only on our distro that uses it, but you can on top of any GNU Linux system, whether you're using, Triskel or Debian or Fedora, what have you. We have a binary installation mechanism you can use, and you can try it out. Or if you're brave, put GUIX-SD on a USB key and try to install it. We have, like Chris said, we have about a little over 3,000 packages right now, but what we really need are system services that use those packages to provide, to run the useful daemons like databases and things. So we need more of those. We lack a lot of that, especially for web development. Documentation, always, we have a lot of people come in and, have the documentation, we have a nice manual, but it needs a lot of beefing up. So when you use this, a lot of people have suggestions about how we can change the docs. We'd love patches to the code for that. You can help us, if you're really technical, you can help us improve the container implementation. I'm the only one that's worked on it so far, and I'd love other people to help me add more features, make it competitive with Docker.
Hey guys, we're running low on time. Do you want to have questions?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, this is the last slide.
Okay. All right. So we're good. People can jump up for questions now, I think. We're at the end. We love help, basically. Oh, wait. I do have a short story here. Let's take one question, and I'll see if I have time to give it. All right, go ahead.
You have 15 minutes.
Oh,
okay.
Wait. Oh, we have 15 minutes.
We extended the time.
Oh, we have 15 minutes, then let me tell my story, and then you can go, Frank. Okay. All right. Let me tell a story about this.
Story time.
This is let's take that image from long ago at the very beginning of this, where we saw the image of the containers on the Docker thing or containers on anything, and let's take it to the max, right? Imagine that you run a warehouse full of containers. You have customers, and they want things. You put them into the container on one side. It's a nice black box, and you take the thing on the other side. And you're like, this black box container is great because somebody else solved it for me. And then the foreman, and you have thousands of these things. And then the foreman comes in and goes, hey, boss, we got a problem here. We got this shell shock or this heart bleed. We got to open up all them containers and figure out how to modify them. And you're like, what? The whole reason we got these things is so that I don't have to know what's inside of them. And you're like calling the manufacturers of the black boxes, and they're not answering their phones, right? And you look out the window, and there's a warehouse over there, and you see a team of little robots. And the little robots are building containers just like it, except they're able to holographically project the carts so that they're not like taking up as much space and cracking the concrete. That's the dynamic versus static linking part. And they've got a list of instructions, and when you say, oh no, we need to upgrade OpenSSL, they go, oh, okay, and right away, boss, and they just rebuild all the containers, right? So if you saw that warehouse across the road and you look back at your warehouse, why wouldn't you move over to that model? It would be crazy not to. So this is my call against, statically compiled distributions as a solution. And that's it. Credits, more credits. Thank you, and questions. Frank, take it away.
Hi, Frank.
So can you go back to the slide that is called functional?
Yes.
Yeah, all the way back.
Just fast forward? Oh, yeah, okay.
Time wizards.
Okay, so in the 90s, people had a good idea how to write perfect software, and this was a simple two-step process. Step 1, write the perfect specification. Step 2, do it.
Right.
Okay, so this didn't work out that well. So when I see like a first step here, write precise specified dependencies, I was like, that's really hard. So if I, for example, OwnCloud, on our side, we have trouble with the first step, because writing precise specified dependencies that work in every environment for everybody with different setups, different configuration is really hard. And with really hard, I mean close to impossible. So that's my main. I mean, we package OwnCloud for all kinds of distributions, and we know how to package them. It's just like the world is so different.
Right, but if you're putting it in a Docker container, you've also precisely specified things.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a
right. So this
not
is
a solution, yeah.
So well, except that we're doing that as well, but with a functional paradigm, right? We're doing things with very precise specifications, except that it's all declared, right? So we haven't given up. I think both of them end up doing precision. Just one of them does it haphazardly, right? So so I think that it is hard to a certain extent, except part of the challenges you often hit where you're trying to manage different systems is that they might have different libraries and things like that. And here, we're very carefully, you are free to say which specific libraries, and it won't have to fight with anything else on the system. And that's one of the differences, right? Like, you don't long have to fight with the rest of the system. Yes, it's more work to do that and stuff like that, but if you do the work up front, and if you included a GUIX.scm, assuming that all your dependencies are packaged for GUIX, which might be a lot of work, but I did it for Media Goblin. We'll have Media Goblin and GUIX very shortly, I hope, ignoring the JavaScript part. You've already done that once, and when you upgrade your things, it's just submitting a patch upstream. It's not very difficult, I think. You could even provide your own GUIX.scm that's independent of GUIX itself. And so I think that precision is already in the system. It's just sloppy precision at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Frank.
Yep. Frank is great. OwnCloud is great.
We like OwnCloud here.
Two questions. They're very quick, like yes or no kind of things. Do you have an intentional connection to content addressability as it's expressed by something like IPFS? Because I saw you had these sort of key-like things in your language.
Yes, yeah. So it's not specifically, strictly speaking, a content addressable storage system, but it basically is. Each package, each recipe we can identify uniquely with a hash, and it goes into this database of things. So it's not exactly content addressable, but it is.
we do have ways that this could end up happening, right? We could include, if we get to the point of complete reproducibility, there's no reason why we can't have a database full of what the expected output hash is when the package is done, right? In fact, we even.
I think that was
oh, maybe.
I think it was kind of different, but sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
It is effectively a content addressable storage system.
So content addressable storage is kind of fits with your language, your functional language and addressing scheme. Great. Scheme, I mean. The second one is, would I be correct? I'm if I were to, the impression I get is that you're pushing configuration to the edge.
What do you mean?
So, Docker, the configuration goes to, let's say, some expert, okay? And then the Docker image is kind of like bound together in a way that's distributed the same to anybody who pulls that image down and uses it. Whereas with GUIX, it looks like what you're doing is you're pushing the language.
Yeah.
You're pushing out the code
Yes.
of GUIX
Yep.
all the way down to the local machine.
Yeah.
Where the local machine,
Yes, the users of GUIX have the source code to build everything themselves.
Can we make that the last question we need to set up for the?
Okay.
Can you respond?
Okay.
Well, we need to allow everyone to.
actually, I want to step out.
Okay.
All right, go.
But
Go
so
for it.
thank you for your question. I don't think I actually finished the answer.
Oh, wait.
Keep this going until 10?
Okay. So you.
Okay, so continue to speak.
Great.
I'm not-
Great. Okay. Yeah. So
I
the
just want to get on to the
yes.
next
Thank you. So yeah, basically, each user of GUIX, instead of getting a binary, actually gets the full source code of GUIX, and whether or not they build that on their own machine is dependent on whether or not they trust a third party to provide them binaries. So a lot of distributions are binary based, your Debians, your Fedoras, and you download pre-built stuff. I mean, there's source packages and stuff too. But on GUIX by default, unless you trust someone to provide binaries like our build farm, GUIX will build everything from source, starting from the bootstrap binaries. So that we don't have the trusting problem as much.
But you don't have to do everything where you compile everything by hand because
No.
we do have binary substitutes available for you. Which, if you're familiar with functional programming, the binary packages are basically the memoized versions of the functional procedures, but that's getting a bit nerdy.
It's a cache. Yes.
Can you comment more on the relationship between GUIX and NIX? You talked a little bit,
Yeah.
like, are you guys sharing implementation of some things, or are you completely re-implementing a lot of the, like?
Okay, yeah, okay, right. So the similarities. We use the NIX daemons code, somewhat modified currently. We do have plans to make our own. But so that's a daemon written in C++ that we use. We also use their Hydra continuous integration software.
Also currently.
And we also want to have a replacement for that eventually too. But that's where the similarities end. We've replaced everything else. We've replaced all the user side tools, all of the, of course, the language that all the package expressions are written in, the build scripts, everything.
But one thing is that we do owe a lot of our ideas to Nix, right? Like Nix, we didn't talk about it much here because, trying to save space, right? But Nix, GUIX was inspired, the core developer, the original maintainer and the current core developer of GUIX, Ludovic, was originally a Nix developer for years, and it's because of the difficulty of building tooling on top of it that he started GUIX.
Yeah.
So,
And of course, free software, like ethical concerns too, but so.
yeah,
Yep.
it's also a pure system. It's much easier to pollute a pure system than it is to remove impurities, it turns out. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah. GUIXSD.
keep it pure anyway.
GUIXSD is a FSF certified, fully free distribution. By the way, we should have mentioned that, but we didn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, so this may be a stupid question, but how hard would it be to implement an automatic CVE check on each of the GUIX scripts?
That's a wonderful question because we actually have a tool that does that. It's not perfect, but it actually does talk to the CVE database and tries to use package metadata to say oh hey, we have linters that check for code style problems, but it also will talk to I think the MITRE CVE database and be like, hey, you didn't patch this, or we think you didn't patch this. It's not 100%, but yeah.
So it could maybe use some tweaking, but we're already in that direction. Yeah.
So how quickly or how easy is it currently or planned to mix sysadmin install packages with user install packages? Like you mentioned,
Right.
you don't need privileges
Okay,
for this.
so let's imagine a scenario where you've got, your system and then it's we're a GCC4 shop, and you're but I need GCC5 to compile this, right? And it's no problem because you can install GCC4 and effectively you've got that /GNU store and a whole bunch of hash is inside of it, right? And your profile is just a symlink forest. It just points into those hashes, and those hashes point at each other, right? So when your profile in general, you'll normally be using core utils and everything else like that. But when you say GUIX package -I GCC and you pulled on the GCC5, it doesn't conflict with anybody else on the system. And you will end up at that point, if you have something on top of that, the trees will diverge up there. But otherwise else, you still end up sharing everything beneath it. So you can maximize as much shared stuff up until the point where you don't want to anymore. Okay. And then, and then you can diverge.
And can you mask off packages that you don't want showing up, or?
Like Gen 2 style?
Yes.
You could just not install them. I mean, you have full control over what you pick to have installed.
You
So,
could-
like
you could
you couldn't say I don't want to use anything that uses Python. I mean, we don't have something like that. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could walk the graph though and see whether or not your profile has it in there.
We
though.
have no built-in tool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm running GUIX right now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Woo!
Oh,
Homework. Everyone else install GUIX.
so I saw on the Leader Planet pamphlet. I was like, oh, I might as well see what it's like. Well, actually, I had it for a few months now.
Okay.
I don't have 0.9 yet,
Yeah.
but I noticed it has transactional upgrades and
Uh-huh.
rollback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen rollback in a distro before.
Yeah.
I was wondering now that you're adding Emacs commands and stuff, and it's becoming more user friendly. What's the next step? Because are we going to add GNU?
So we've got okay, so you kind of almost answered it right there. Like, now that we have Emacs commands and it's more user friendly, GUIX is great if you're an Emacs user, right? Like, we have an amazing Emacs user interface. Turns out not everybody uses Emacs, right? Which is one of my complaints. Which is one of my complaints to Ludovic, saying it's the Emacs of distros. I'm like, I'm not sure you're capturing the full audience that could be interested in this. But you can still use a command line and stuff like that. But it would be great to have all of those wonderful things that you can currently do in the Emacs interface. Like we showed this much earlier, right? You know, you can do something like this where you have the different profiles and you can even diff them. That's something we didn't mention, right? You're diffing things.
That's what it was.
I have a web interface prototype. It's not really usable, but I got to the point where you could actually install packages with it and look at your profile generation. So
And it was
something like that. We just need
and
to do more.
it was a very small amount of code to be able to get
I
that.
saw a demo by Ludovic Cortez.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
he did that in Boston,
he did a diff, and he also did a command where he could list all of his
Yeah.
packages.
Yeah.
And you can
It's pretty cool, and so we'd like to continue in that direction to make that more exposed. I want to get to Stefano, and then we should wrap up.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank
yeah.
you.
So I have a question about the case where security updates get difficult. Like, for instance, one of the security updates you have to do is basically imposing an API breakage that will need to be fixed by someone.
Right.
And that can potentially ripple down. So that's the real case, which is complicated for traditional distro to deal with. So I wonder if there is something specific in GUIX that make for package maintainers easier to address those cases.
To do security updates?
Not security updates in general. So when security updates like break the API of packages that depend.
Okay.
We have both.
So-
we
Yeah,
have
okay.
both cases,
So-
both when the API doesn't change and when it does.
Okay, yeah,
So,
great. Okay,
that's
okay, yeah. So,
what I'm curious about.
so since we have that whole idea of the dependency graph thing, when you update, let's say OpenSSL in the tree, that'll change the hashes of every single thing that depends on it. So if you wanted to build, you could our CI system will rebuild the whole tree that got changed, and it'll tell you what has broken or what hasn't.
No, that I understand, but the point
Okay.
is whether if the rebuild of the dependent packages does not work automatically, and you still need to have the maintainer change something in the build rules to adapt or that kind of stuff.
Oh, and like change the build recipe?
Yes, for instance.
Yeah. So that grep example was very simplistic. You can actually tweak all of the parameters
Okay.
of that and actually add new code in to pass to the build daemon
But
to do
in
the
that
build.
case, before being able to have everything fixed, you still need to have the maintainers of every single package like deal with the package before the fix gets to the users, right?
Sure, we could do that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in the case of not breaking an API, we have something called graphs,
Yeah.
which will do a replacement. But
Yeah.
maybe we should talk about it after?
Yeah, sure.
More? That'd be great. Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
All right. On that note, let's end this talk. This is a great turnout, great audience. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to James. Thank you, everybody. Great talk. Thank you, Leader Planet and FSF staff.